first time I'm going to be talking about something that isn't just directly or this related to like a bigger issue that's more like important than just normal video games. But I kind of wanted to throw my hat in the ring and talk about this a little bit because I've been following this for a while, and Lord have mercy, this is something wild. So we're going to talk about the Karl Jobst and Billy Mitchell lawsuit. I've got some notes written down on some paper just so I can have my thoughts organized. And so so basically the main crux of the issue is that it was widely believed for I think years now that Billy Mitchell, a former, or I guess technically still Donkey Kong champion, was suing Karl Jobst, a YouTuber who exposes cheaters in video games, for his defamatory statements that Billy Mitchell was a cheater. Turns out that was not true. It was not about Billy Mitchell's cheating at all. That was a part of the lawsuit, but that was not what was being sued for. Billy Mitchell was suing for Karl Jobst' defamatory statements regarding the suicide of a YouTuber named Apollo Legend. Apollo Legend was in a lawsuit with Billy Mitchell, and according to Karl Jobst, the quote timeline of events, which was his defense, was that Apollo Justice was in this ongoing lawsuit. He had to pay Billy Mitchell a large sum of money, couldn't afford it, had to take a job, his health declined, and he took his own life. It did not come out until a good while later that a lot of that was just simply untrue. Apollo never claimed in his note that Billy Mitchell was involved in this, and it has since been proven otherwise that Apollo never had to pay Billy Mitchell, period. That was not in the lawsuit. It is very, very interesting, and in my opinion, very, very misleading, and I think a very shitty thing that Karl Jobst did, especially considering how hard Karl would go after so many people. I look at the completionist and just how unrelenting he was with him, when rightfully so. And I just can't help but think, if the shoe was on the other foot and it was Billy Mitchell who made the I Lost video, Jobst would have tore it apart, because it's ridiculous. It's not an apology. It's not an admission of guilt. It's just justifications, and everyone else was wrong except for me. I'm not the bad guy. Which is exactly what the completionist did, and we all made fun of him for it. Rightfully so. I don't see why Karl Jobst thinks that he is any better. Well, I can tell you why I think that, because it sounds to me like he's a narcissist with a hero complex. So if we continue down my notes here, for about, I think it was 2 years now, Karl Jobst has deliberately left out the Apollo Justice, or the Apollo Legend side of the statements, because it didn't fit his agenda. Now, I guess it is truthful that, Karl never lied, he never said anything false, but he did leave out some pretty important information that I think was very vital to people's decision on whether they should support him, and that leads into a very large issue, which was the GoFundMe for his legal defense, reaching over $200,000. That's a lot of clams, and I think it's very interesting, because how many of those people would have supported him if they knew that he was actually being sued for those statements, instead of just the cheating? Because everyone knows Billy Mitchell's a cheater. No one cares about that. That's not that important. That's just some petty video game drama. But insinuating that he was the cause for someone's suicide is very serious, and that should not be taken lightly. And in my opinion, I believe that Billy Mitchell was completely in the right to sue, and he should have won. I'm not a Billy Mitchell fan by any means, but you can't, saying that someone had to pay and then that was indirectly or directly the cause of their suicide, that is defamatory. That's just literally the definition of defamatory. You told a lie, him having to pay was not true, and then said that because of that, in a roundabout way, he took his own life. That is defamatory. There is a screenshot that Karl Jobst said that I'm going to put on screen now, that says, quote, "Proven video game cheater sued me." I believe that was pretty cut and dry. It makes it seem like that, proven video game cheater sued me. That sounds like he's suing you because of the cheating. You didn't say proven video game cheater sued me because whatever. I mean, come on. Like, it's pretty obvious. And I have, again, in my notes, I have, people supporting the cheating versus supporting the suicide claims. I looked at the donations for the lawsuit, and I saw that Dark Viper AU donated a decent amount. And would Dark Viper AU have supported that much if he knew that it was actually about Apollo's suicide? Who knows? Here's another screenshot that says, quote, imagine threatening to sue someone because they accused you of cheating. That is very, very, very misleading. I can't necessarily say it's wrong. It's not false. It's not a lie. But it's very manipulative, very scummy, and I think Karl Jobst is a major, major scumbag. I took a look at his, quote, retraction. I put that in big quotations. The retraction that he claimed was very well viewed because it was at the very end of a Dark Souls video. I actually timed it. The video itself is 30 minutes and 12 seconds, and the retraction started at 28 minutes and 25 seconds. That means if he started talking and stopped talking the minute the video ended, that would only leave about a minute and a half of a retraction in a 30-minute video at the very end of something completely unrelated. That sounds to me like you're trying to bury the retraction so no one can see it because it doesn't further your agenda. He says in his I Lost video that, he would not have said those things unless he had very good evidence. But the very good evidence was a Reddit post. He says, verbatim, you can go watch the video, that he got that post, or that the idea that he paid from Reddit. You telling me that this guy who has built up a reputation of being credible, of being truthworthy, of being, worth a damn, his defense was that he got it from Reddit? And I mean, we all, again, with the completionist, we all, took what he said with the completionist because, the completionist's response was terrible. His response was just, everyone else is guilty except for me. I didn't know what was going on. It's not really my fault. That's exactly what he said here. He says, I would never in good faith, lie to my audience. And it's like, okay, yeah, I guess you did have evidence, but the evidence is worthless. Someone with your credibility and someone who claims to be as good as you are, you can't use a Reddit post as your justification. And again, you didn't retract it until months later in a 30-minute video on a video game that is not related at all. That was only a minute long. And that leads to the big point I have at the bottom here is false statements do not equal hidden truths. I believe it's difficult to quantify, fully, but Karl Jobst did not lie. He did not say something false. He did not say something untruthful. But he kept the truth secret. He kept it buried. He kept it hidden. And his defense in his I Lost video was that, the news, they just ran with it. But you never corrected it. You never corrected what they said. You let them run around with it. And I know, you're not their babysitter. It's not your job to, keep them in control of the narrative. But, I mean, if the shoe was on the other foot, if Billy Mitchell was suing you, or if you were suing Billy Mitchell because he said, defamatory things about you, you would want the truth of the defamatory statements to be public. He says, I didn't want to give away my legal defense. Yeah, that's kind of a cop-out answer. That's kind of his whole defense is the thing in Australia where if the majority of the harmful statements are true, then the defamatory one isn't really relevant. But that's not really what happened. That's not really what happened. Billy Mitchell didn't just pick out one sentence of a whole story. He highlighted something very serious in the middle of some stuff that was pretty and whatever. You could argue all day long about Billy Mitchell being a cheater, but that's not really important, especially compared to someone's suicide. That is extraordinarily important, and in my opinion, that's not picking out something specific out of a large text. That's calling out something really shitty. And I think Karl Jobst should be held to a higher standard. I saw a comment, if Karl Jobst was reviewing the I Lost video and it was posted by someone else, he would rip it to shreds. And I think it should be ripped to shreds. I do not think Karl Jobst has any credibility. I think he is a narcissist, and I think that he is a manipulator, and he should not be trusted talking about anything else. And if you look at his channel right now, he's just posting again. Just his, back to the grind. Back to what he was posting before. That's really, in my opinion, really goes to show what kind of guy he is. Reminds me a lot of like the Colleen Ballinger, completely different type of accusations, but Colleen Ballinger, Miranda Sings, after the accusations came out, she took a break for a little bit, made a quote-unquote vlog where the apology was only like a minute and a half, 2 minutes inside of the vlog, and then she went right back to posting like nothing ever happened. And people ate it up. Her fans came back in droves, and she has plenty of supporters. And I imagine Karl Jobst will have tons of supporters and tons of fans, even though what he did was awful, and he should be held to a higher standard. And in my opinion, if the completionist can be, harassed and made fun of and bullied because of the charity scandal, Karl Jobst needs to be held to the exact same standard, because just like the completionist, Karl Jobst misinformed people. He didn't lie, but he told false truths. He told things that were, half of the story. And I think that in a situation like this is just as bad. I know I'm kind of rambling on about just nonsense, but this is just my quick opinion on it. I think Karl Jobst needs to be held accountable. And I suppose he is being held accountable. He lost a lawsuit, and he's going to have to pay a large sum of money. But his whole defense was not on the court system. He tried to play into that court of public opinion, and he lost the real courts, and he needs to lose that court of public opinion. So, that's really my take about it. I hope that the justice that was served is the one that needs to be served. And I hope that he learns and grows from his mistakes and comes to his senses and posts a real video that isn't just semantics. So yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say.